This is Camille. Just thrilled to have our special keynote speaker today, Naveen Zutshi from Databricks, to join us to talk about the journey to generative AI performance expert. Naveen has been a good friend for a number of years, been part of our CXO network. Naveen, welcome today. Really thrilled to have you here.
Gamil, great to talk to you again. Yeah, it's a treat to be talking to you today.
So let's just open up by giving a little bit of your background, which is amazing. So you started at Cisco a number of years ago. You went on from there to a few startups. You ran a major role at Gap, so the retail space for a number of years. Then you went from there to Palo Alto Networks, and now you're at Databricks. I mean, it seems like you're just picking all the fun places to go in the world to enjoy deploying your skills and whatnot. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, computer engineer. So loved coding. Realized early on that maybe I was a better manager than a better coder. So moved into management, mostly engineering management for a while, but stayed technical, which I found my true calling. And then in between, I've been in startups, been in large companies. And what has been interesting is sometimes you can use what you learned in high-tech companies and leverage that in transformational activities in retailers, as an example. So I have a special affinity for the work I did at Gap because it was a huge opportunity because there was a lot of legacy and there was a huge improvement to be made, both in the e-commerce side as well as in the store side. And then in every job that I've done, I think it's been amazing to meet with so many smart people and work with some amazing talent around. So I've been incredibly fortunate for that, and incredibly fortunate for both the investor community, the VC community that I've worked with, or the startups that I've worked with. So whether I was at Gap or Palo Alto Networks and now at Databricks, I have worked with a lot of startups as well. And it's been very fortunate to be in Silicon Valley and be able to meet and work with some of the brightest founders out there.
So at Databricks, you're sort of at the center of this conversation that we're going to focus on today, which is generative AI and kind of the data that it's at the center of all of this. But maybe you can start by just sharing your own view of perhaps how important CIOs should be prioritizing generative AI. I mean, is this a unique opportunity? We've all been through the mobile era, the social era, the cloud era. I mean, is this different? If so, why?
Yeah, and I can tell you a little bit of my own story, right? When it's, obviously for me, November of 22 is when saw the ChatGPT come out. And then like I spent hours and hours asking all sorts of questions and getting some amazing answers. And so initial hype was incredible, right? And I think at least for me personally, I feel it is a seminal moment, similar to or maybe stronger than for an enterprise compared to the mobile moment or the internet moment. But at the same time, over the last year now, we have seen what it can do and can't do. And so when I talk to my peers and when we also do it ourselves, there is some sense of realism come into this. There is some level of trough of disillusionment that we are going through as an industry. And I think we'll come out pretty strong out of that as well. So I feel incredibly confident that the future is extremely bright for Gen AI. But there are some thorny problems that we need to also solve.
Great. I'd love to dive into those. So maybe you could sort of describe what maybe some of the early learnings are as you think about kind of use cases there internally at Databricks. Don't share anything confidential. And maybe I'm sure you talk to CIOs in your role there at Databricks as well. I mean, what are you learning? What are some of the early findings about how to become excellent here?
Yeah, so I think the first use case that I've seen the most usage of, both internally at Databricks as well as with our customers, has been around the Copilot use case. And so I think whether it is primarily on software development itself, we have it rolled out to all of our engineers in R&D as well as in IT. We see a lot of our customers have rolled out different versions of whether it's GitHub Copilot or Copilot X or other versions of it, or Replit, who is a customer of ours. And they have seen various amounts of benefits, anywhere from 10% to 40% of benefit. And I think what is interesting is also the use cases. So the use cases on software development have been around test migration, test unit case creations, migration of codes from one
Hmm.
language to another. That's been a really good one. I have found even applications like Salesforce, our team is using it for Salesforce development and finding it pretty useful for Salesforce development as well, which I wouldn't have thought would be a massive library to do it. So I think that is a more established and more mature use case.
Hmm.
And many companies are mandating every developer to be using Copilot in their daily work, which is
Yeah,
fantastic.
it seems to have become sort of the new standard or the new expectation around productivity. I mean, in the 10 to 40%, that 40% number could be huge, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the transformation there. And as you think about that, how will it evolve? I mean, if we're moving from Copilot to RAG, from RAG to where does it go?
Yeah, so I think that's the second use case has been the summarization and the RAG use case where the intent is we want to drive a massive notion of summarization and we want to reduce hallucination using RAG.
Mhm.
And then ultimately what we are seeing is starting to see this action and intent based,
Hmm.
where you take an intent and you can have multi-step process that actually achieves that intent. And I think that is where hopefully the industry is moving. We are seeing some early examples of that coming in, primarily in the B2C space, but I'm assuming those will also translate into the B2B space.
So if that's the future where we have intent-based agents actually resulting in true productivity or workflow redesign, what are the risks, do you think, to get to that? I mean, what are some of the obstacles, I suppose?
Let's just start with even RAG use cases. The biggest obstacle today still is reliability, right? So you have reliability of answers coming back. And in an enterprise setting, your reliability needs to be pretty high, close to
Yeah.
perfection, right?
Mhm.
And with generative AI use cases, while you're reducing hallucination, it's not always complete. That's
Mhm.
one area. The other area is unfortunately, still completeness of data is still an issue, right? A lot of customers still talk about that, right? I don't have all the data sets in a common form.
Right.
For example, we provide Delta. Do we have all of it in a data lake, or a
Mhm.
lake house paradigm like Delta? Do we have the access control setup? So that's another area, which is like, if I took out this unstructured data as an example, and then I ran it against a RAG model, but then you asked it a question and I asked it a question, it should be privacy preserving for you versus me, right? And
Yes.
how
Yes.
do you establish that access control processes so that it's privacy preserving? Is something if you started from, for example, our pattern there is you start from Delta and put Unity catalog on it. That will give you that, but I'm sure there are other ways of doing it as well. But it's a difficult problem, and you want to really solve it properly because you want to ensure the right access to the right user base in your company. So that's another area that we're working on. And then if you think about now each summarization or each step of the process, if that reliability is very high, then can
Yeah.
I lang chain it together into a common model where then I can
Mm.
drive intent into this sequence of steps, and those
Mm.
sequence of steps give me the result. For example, like could I decide on a vacation travel for, like, I want to
Right.
go to Europe in summer. I provide all the parameters and it books the hotels, books the activities for me, books the flights. And I think that validation step with human in the loop is something which will still be required in before it becomes truly autonomous. I think that we are ways away from truly autonomous state.
And what do you think will be the success metrics that will keep people from falling into that trough of disillusionment? You know, we've watched these various high hyped sort of agendas be slowed down as people don't realize sort of the results that they want. How will you measure success, or what will you suggest to provide metrics of success here at this stage?
Yeah, I think, Gamil, one thing I would say is like AI as a whole, you would think that like what has been the success? The success has been dramatic, right?
Mhm.
So there's a dramatic success in both revenue growth.
Mm.
Let's say you have so many use cases in general AI that are now in production. and companies have seen revenue growth as well as profitability improvements as a result of AI. In fact, many companies are just AI based as a
Yes,
consequence
sure.
of it. I would say the same thing would happen in Gen AI cases too. I think the productivity benefit is the biggest one. If you look at the McKinsey report, it says 30% of all work could be automated by Gen AI.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if that is true or not yet.
A big number, right?
It's a big number, but I would expect my expectation is you start with some core use cases where you develop some level of success and you climb on to that success and then deliver more scale.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, for enterprise companies especially, it will be some level of operating income increase
Mhm.
as well as ability to become more effective. For example, your sales teams are more effective in growing their business, or
Yep.
your inside sales teams are more effective in reaching to more customers.
Hmm. So, one of the questions that CIOs often ask is buy versus build. And the idea here that, okay, this is new technology. We need to learn new technology. We got people and staffing issues, but I've got existing vendors and they're offering AI capable functions, Copilot, as you mentioned. Do I do a little of both? Do I become an expert at building new greenfield agent solutions with intent to really change our workflow? How do you think about that bigger buy versus build quandary, I guess?
Yeah, I think I look at the build right now at two vectors. One is transitory, another one may be more permanent. One vector is, hey, the field is still nascent. My SaaS vendors or my new startups can't achieve the scale yet, or they are not working on the problem that I'm working on. Maybe I will experiment and build something in production. Maybe that will
Yep.
last for a year or two. By that time, the SaaS company will catch up and I'll leverage their product. So that's one vector. The second
Yep.
vector is, hey, um, I have proprietary data or I have proprietary algorithms that I want to really
Right.
use against private data, and I don't want to share this data with my SaaS vendor. I want to build it on a framework that is my platform, and I think there will be continued use of that. Whether it's Bloomberg's use case or Replit build their use case. So it's not just technology companies. I think non-technology companies will also have some use cases like that. So
Yep.
that's two vectors. And I think on the buy side, though, what we have primarily seen is newer vendors coming in play that we can leverage their GenAI capabilities, and that has been very, very interesting. And so we are using some buy as well, and internally we are using both buy and build.
So it's a hybrid model.
It is a hybrid model, and my expectation is over time, internal use cases, you will do more buy than build,
Mhm.
but you will have some level of build done for sure.
And the final question I want to ask is around responsible AI. I mean, this is a concept that we hear about in the press, and whether it's well understood or not, I don't know. But the idea that there's potential bias, there's hallucinations, there's risk of privacy, as you noted before. How do you think about responsible AI, or what advice would you give to a CIO as they think about how to be in front of this? And they've got risk teams and cyber teams, and of course, customers and users, et cetera. So,
Yeah, especially from an enterprise company that sells to B2B. I would speak mostly for the B2B use cases. I think
yep.
B2C use cases may have additional privacy restrictions. So from me, like customer data is sacrosanct. How are we ensuring that the customer data is privacy preserving? We are talking to the customers before we use their data for training or examples or internal employee data. There is personalization and there is privacy on that data as well. So you have this confidential and sensitive data. You have right classifications that you already have in place as a company, and you need to preserve those classifications back into your AI models as well. That's one area. And second is policies. What kind of policies have you established? Make sure that you have really robust and clear policies established with legal, and that you have educated your teams and your employees on those policies, so that because there is a huge amount of hype to use the tools and also the external tools that are available that give you a huge productivity benefit, but you don't want to inadvertently use that in the wrong manner.
Yep.
And then I think having some level of governance, I think having good governance model in place where you have the right quality assurance, right bias decrease. And depending on the use case, you may have some level of hallucination is acceptable, but in some cases, we need complete precision. And
Yep.
you have to also understand what kind of use case are you actually delivering based on that. What kind of information do you want to create which is sacrosanct versus not.
Do you see an organizational role for responsible AI? And if so, whose shoulders, so to speak, does it rest on?
Hard for me to say. Right now, I see our legal, security, and the IT team are working together on this as an example. But I'm assuming in other companies, especially in B2C companies, that might be a specific role.
Great. Well, Naveen, I wanted to thank you for being our special guest today. Naveen Zutshi, Senior Vice President, CIO of Databricks, a great friend. Thank you for sharing your insights and intelligence about the AI journey for our CXO network. So appreciate you being a special guest today.
Thank you, Gamal.